Friends, when I think about religious liberty, let me offer just on a lighter note before we wade into the heavier stuff. I tell you that I knew a group of boys who could have benefited from knowing more about religious liberty. It was at the Progressive Church in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that the junior deacons of the Progressive Church were voluntold that they would participate in the Sunday worship experience. So to get them ready for the Sunday worship experience, the big deacons decided that they would give them a tutorial session in which they equipped them, Dr. Sadler, for the worship service. I came as someone who was working closely with the boys as Sunday school teacher and as a youth ministry leader. I came to be supportive and to encourage them and to do my best to walk with them at that stage for such an important responsibility. And as I watched the big deacons mentor the junior deacons, one of the things that I realized was that the big deacons were creating clones of themselves. That instead of offering the junior deacons the meaning of what they were supposed to do on Sunday morning and allowing the junior deacons to live into the sound of the genuine in their own sense of what it meant to worship, the big deacons told them to sing this song. When you stand before the people, read the scripture this way. When it's time to pray, pray like this. And you cannot convince me with any amount of money that a 12 to 15-year-old worships in the same way as a 65-year-old man. You cannot tell me that they would have sung the songs that the big deacons chose for them, or prayed using the same language as the big deacons fed them for that Sunday worship. Those junior deacons needed to know the work of the BJC so that their notions of religious freedom might be mobilized and operative in those moments in which they were called upon to do that big responsibility of leading in worship. I share that with you as we now think about the work of this magnificent center. I share that with you as we think about the ways in which we are called in this moment to revisit our working definitions of religious freedom. I visited the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation's website during my homework for this address. What a provocative and informative way to introduce the work of the center. You've heard it. Amanda read it for us, told us it from this platform. I quote, "Public discourse about religion has been white too long." Now let that sink in for a moment if it has not already sunk in for you. And let us use this moment as an opportunity to invite not only the center's team, the BJC team, but each of us into a moment of deeper reflection. I have to ask more questions. What is the solution then, based upon the problem, I believe, that the center has posed to each of us? What kinds of instruction and practice will disrupt, as Dr. Dent said, the discourse and give us permission to explore and embrace faith freedom from the margins instead of the mainstream? Well, if I were to answer that question and offer at least an observation, I think I would offer on today that it is important that we develop new definitions and strategies that give us permission to dream and do beyond what we have witnessed on the ground, and to make those definitions and strategies and practices much more accessible than what I believe they have been. I want to begin this point by redefining the idea of religious liberty, at least for myself. I encourage us to imagine it as the freedom to be human in a way that does not violate the inherent dignity and personhood of any other human being. So as abstract as that may sound, that idea may sound, I believe that it is grounded in the religion of Jesus. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I wonder sometimes aloud, how different the world would be if a common understanding of our humanity was the idea that we exist to love and to be loved. But absent that sense of purpose, that mission statement, maybe a baseline approach could at least be to our shared public spaces, that is, our shared spaces of public life. Maybe we could at least allow how we move and live and breathe and interact to be governed by curiosity and a willingness to enter dialogue with people whose backgrounds and beliefs differ from our own. In other words, we could acknowledge that people are free to explore, encounter, and discover what it means to be human through practices and rituals and ideas that do not necessarily conform to the way that you or I learn to be human. There is, however, a push and pull of cultural norms that will not let such definitions of freedom govern our policies and interactions without there being some sort of backlash. Religious freedom, as employed by some individuals and communities, has navigated the marketplace of ideas by establishing the boundaries of the discourse. So religious freedom, when employed by some, is good. Religious freedom, when employed by others, is not. Finbar Curtis presumes as much in his work, The Production of American Religious Freedom. He argues religious freedom is a malleable rhetoric employed for a variety of purposes. He continued, part of the reason for this malleability is that religious identities are themselves produced in response to social and cultural contests. So Curtis is helping us understand that without these conflicts, there would be no need to carve out a notion in our collective life called religious freedom. So these formulations that we have created, they require further investigation since they are so malleable, so fluid. To create working definitions and strategies that will help the center fulfill its mission, I think that there are several more questions, implied questions at least, that can prompt us to sit with the uses and aims of the idea of religious freedom. Let me offer at least two at this moment. When is it appropriate to invoke religious freedom? Whose religious freedom has been privileged in the prior iterations of its use? Historically, we can find the uneven ways in which religious freedom has been used to justify different social practices. I borrow from Tisa Winger, the Yale historian's ideas, when she states the loudest demands for religious freedom have generally privileged the majority. Campaigns for Bible reading in the public schools. I'm now in Texas. I inserted that, excuse me. Campaigns for Bible readings in the public schools, or for blue laws that enforce a day of rest on Sundays, for example, were successfully advanced by some, as well as opposed by others, in the name of religious freedom. In the 19th century, she continues, pro-slavery voices invoked religious freedom to defend the quote-unquote peculiar institution, attacking abolitionism as a threat to the moral foundations and religious convictions of the white South. So she helps us right there, just as the center has. Race is an unavoidable topic in the US for this reason. It has been a part of the larger dialogue, whether we like it or not. So the website blurb really has helped us. It has given us a talking point that invites us to dream of a new world. But it is a world that must first reckon with the reality on the ground. Theologian M. Shawn Copeland provides a way forward in this matter. In her article, Racism and the Vocation of the Theologian, she offers insights that help us see clearly the need for a conversation about race, a serious conversation about race and religion, to take place in a post-September 11th world. And I want to add a post-Charlottesville, post-January 6th world. She notes that the acts of terror committed on and after September 11th remind us of the racialized fissures that exist in the United States. We saw that in Charlottesville as well. We saw that on January 6th. Copeland argues that we cannot avoid seeing race in our everyday lives, but the problem is that we insert our racial biases that contribute to the stereotypes that inform how we interact with one another. Might we consider that when we think about how a young boy can walk up to a home, accidentally ring the doorbell, and then find himself shot by the man behind the door? Those biases that we bring to the way we interact with one another lead to racism. And that racism is a threat to what she says is the creation and development of human community, to the flourishing of the spirit in human lives, the realization of the body of Christ, and to the reign of God. Really, family of faith, racism makes real Christianity, and I put that in quotes, suppress its liberating elements while embracing a nationalism that often asks all non-white persons to lose their ethnic and cultural inheritances in a melting pot of American identity. I'm reminded of Andrew Torba, the founder of the social media platform called Gab, known by its followers as a, quote, parallel Christian society on the internet, end quote. Elizabeth Diaz, in her New York Times article, quotes Torba from his social media post, the day after the mass murder of 10 people in a Buffalo grocery store located in the Black side of Buffalo on May 14, 2022. Torba posted the following words on Gab: "The best way to stop white genocide and white replacement, both of which are demonstrably and undeniably happening, is to get married to a white woman and have a lot of white babies," end quote. Dr. Dent, the work of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, and now this Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation is urgently needed. We need, though, definitions and strategies around religious freedom that will unmask and combat the racism and sexism and homophobia that inform Christian nationalism, that inform anti-democratic rhetoric and practices in the mainstream of our nation. Do you know that there are working groups who have leveraged the backlash in this post-George Floyd Black Lives Matter moment? Do you know that there are groups feeding talking points and strategies to governors who have waged war against AP classes in high school? A governor in Virginia, on day one, in his very first act as governor, offered an executive order that basically banned the teaching of divisive concepts, while not ever really defining divisive concepts. Do you know that there are people who could not spell critical race theory? Much less recognize it if they saw it, using critical race theory to raise unspeakable amounts of money for political campaigns, using the term early and often in the last few election cycles. Groups such as Moms for Liberty get their marching orders from unseen strategists who mobilize these women for issues such as removing books from school and public libraries. What is your counter move? Where is your working group? The religion that baptizes God in the American flag and makes Jesus a proponent of gun rights is much more pervasive and visible in the public domain than the ideas that the BJC, unfortunately, promotes for us to be informed and educated. May I mention a woman who ran for governor in Georgia, this state right here, Candace Taylor. Her campaign slogan was Jesus, guns, and babies. How might the BJC and its Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation present an alternative political framework and invite a new coalition of participants to the table? What space should we create for conversations that help us reimagine a definition of religious liberty that is aligned with the teachings of the young man who was martyred on a cross? How do we walk with people who are torn between their allegiances to their heritage and upbringing and Jesus's reminders to love our neighbors as we love ourselves? Presenting at a conference at Duke University in 1965, the educator and preacher Samuel DeWitt Proctor placed a challenge to people of faith. Amid the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, and other cultural shifts, Proctor encouraged them to pay attention to what was required of people such as ourselves in moments like these. He stated, "This is the wrong time for Christian, intelligent, concerned, dedicated people to be quiet and to allow the bigots and the super patriots to misrepresent us, our country and the cause of Christian idealism, which is still the dominant strain in our great American tradition. You may not agree with all of that statement, but I think the sentiment fits this moment. It's the wrong time for us to be quiet. It is the wrong time for us to allow others to define religious freedom in ways that violate the inherent dignity and personhood of so many people who are already marginalized and oppressed by the forces that have been legislated in so many years past. It is the wrong time to be silent, so I'm grateful for the work of the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation. Public discourse about religion, about religious freedom has been white too long. So I'll say in the vernacular that I sometimes use from the pulpit, what are you going to do about it? This statement sounds like the foundation of an important work, a work in which I believe if we do it well, will move the world in the right direction. Thank you.